Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. This is the show where we talk about faith, family, politics, unity, and anything else I have on my mind. Today we're going to talk about black folks, and patriotism. Many Americans have stereotypes about blacks when it comes to whether or not they love America, are they patriots, or are they people that just have a chip on their shoulders? And certainly some of us do have a chip on our shoulders. Joining me today to talk about this is my old friend, Glenn Loury. Glenn Loury is professor of economics and social work at Brown University. Before that, he was at Harvard. He is someone that's been a public intellectual. He's spoken about race and issues of importance for more than 2 or 3 decades. I lose track of how long Glenn has been around. He's not that much older than me. He has a lot to say, and so help me to welcome Glenn Loury to Conversations. Glenn, welcome to this show.
Oh, Carol, thank you very much. Good to be with you.
Well, Glenn, you suggested talking about blacks and patriotism, and I'd like to understand why you chose that topic. What's interesting about blacks and patriotism?
Well, it's a number of things. I guess I'm not sure where my discomfort begins. I mean, certainly the rioting and protest after the George Floyd incident this summer, the Colin Kaepernick, the taking of the knee, the Black Lives Matter on the side of the basketball court, the 1619 Project at the New York Times. I mean, just a lot of different things where what you had was Black people saying that America wasn't okay, that America was somehow fundamentally a problem, and that our connection to the American project or the American story was oppositional, that we were, going to have to be standing against it. And I just had the feeling that that's an indulgence, that we can't, being a minority population in a great democracy, we can't, define our politics in opposition to the overall thrust of what the country is trying to be and trying to accomplish. And that's what has caused me to be a little bit concerned. I don't like the way that, especially on the radical left edge of Black politics, the anti-Americanism seems to be taking hold.
Well, Glenn, both of us have been in academia for a long time. And I think the seeds of what we see today, it was evident like decades ago with the critical race theory. But what surprises me, and it may surprise you too, is how it seeped into the culture. And you have all these young people, complaining about systemic racism and what they can and can't do. And I know that I was born in the period of real systemic racism, the year of the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case desegregating schools. I watched the civil rights laws pass, and to have these young people complaining that blacks, we need lowered standards, and to see how the progressives are using race, to me that's very dismaying. Both of us, have been in academia, and it seems like some of the worst ideas come from academia.
I wish that I could contradict you on that. It's not like there aren't some good ideas that also come from academia. But I agree that there's a lot of intellectual rot. There's a lot of indulgence, of self-indulgence, of sanctimony, of self-righteousness, of a kind of thoughtless, trendy, sloganeering and virtue signaling, and got to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day kind of thing. And I have nothing against the Indigenous brothers and sisters out there if it needs to be said. But there's just a lot of that. There's a lot of jumping on the bandwagon, writing letters, protesting, so-and-so can't speak. A lot of chest thumping. There's in academia, in the
Right.
colleges, in the elite, effete, closed in on themselves circle of think they're better than everybody else and never had to actually make a dollar doing anything that made the world a better place kind of thing. I mean, I could go on about that for a long time. But
Well,
since I'm in academia and have
right.
devoted my life to it, I'm trying to do the best I can.
Well, I know you are one of the voices that you push back against some of what's happening, and you do have a huge following. A lot of young people respect you. To me, it's so sad how the progressives are manipulating black people and the lies that they're telling young people when it comes to success principles. And I don't know what we do about it, but something needs to be done because they're being lied to and they're engaging in behaviors that can only be destructive to Black Americans and America as a whole.
I hope it's not too late, Dr. Swain. I agree, Carol, with what you just said. I hope it's not too late. I mean, I think about the family, you know, the out of wedlock birth rates and stuff like that. I mean, you could, if you were to try to give a lecture on Black family out of wedlock births at one of these leading colleges, I mean, not like you would get shouted down, but nobody would even show up. You would be considered passe, you know.
But you've never been shouted down on
Or
the
about the
campus, have you?
violence, about the, you know, terrible violence and the upsurge in violence. 2020 has been a horrible year in terms of increases in homicides that are affecting Black people all across this country, largely related to the anti-cop attitude that has been fostered and whatnot. And I mean, it's just a horrible thing. And you got very little that's being said about it. So I just wonder if it's not too late. I'm concerned. I'm concerned
Well,
how to
it's
roll it
never
back.
too late. I don't think it's too late. And when we return from our break, we're going to go deeper into this. But right now, we need a word from our sponsor.
Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain is made possible by Cooper Steel, a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee.
Cooper Steel believes in sponsoring Carol Swain because we believe as she does, you build strong, you stand strong.
What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel is committed to excellence, responsibility, and community. Cooper Steel's motto is, build strong, stand strong. They treat their employees and customers like family. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Learn more about our generous sponsor at coopersteel.com.
I'm back with my guest, Glenn Loury. And Glenn, right before we went to break, you were saying you hope it's not too late for Black America or for America as a whole. I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit.
I'm just saying some of the issues that confront Black America, like the high out of wedlock birth rate where you got 70% of kids born to a woman without a husband, or like the level of criminal violence and homicide that's afflicting Black communities and that has accelerated here in the last year, or like the academic achievement gap and whatnot, all these different issues.
Yeah, they're worsening.
And the conversation is like disconnected from the issues. I mean, you've got Black Lives Matter, you got protests, you got Colin Kaepernick, you got the National Basketball Association, you got the Democratic Party, you got Al Sharpton, you got all of this different stuff, the 1690 Project at the New York Times, you got, but nobody is actually addressing the fundamental issues. And you were talking about the rot on college campuses and how academia is at the root of it. Everywhere I turn, I see unseriousness and I see evasion. This is with respect to the fundamental problems confronting African Americans. And I see a talk about racism and a talk about reparations and a talk about white supremacy and structural this and that. And I just think, you know, the ability to change that conversation what with the apparent results of the last presidential election, what with the collaboration of the media, academia, and whatnot in a particular narrative, the ability to change that conversation. I've been at this for a long time, Carol. I'm sorry to
Well,
go on
I
so
know
long,
you
but I'm
have,
just
Glenn.
saying I'm getting weary, and I don't feel like the tide is turning, or that
Well,
the
don't give up yet.
conversation is moving the way it needs to.
Don't give up yet, but I believe that the political left pushes those issues to distract black people from their true problems. And the fact that President Trump was able to get 18% of the black male vote, double his support among blacks, tells me that there are some people that are waking up and they're not going to be so easily manipulated. But it's like one of the worst things that we don't address the real issues of black crime, the unwed motherhood rate, the abortion rate. Blacks are 12% of the population, black women getting 37% of the abortions. That's genocidal. And places like New York, there are more black babies being aborted than are being born. How is that okay? It's not okay. And I think it's important for us all to speak up. Even if we do get shouted down, I believe there are people who can hear.
Well, this is one I agree with you. I agree with you about the abortion thing. And, it's on the left, you're supposed to be pro-choice. You're not supposed to be pro-life. You're supposed to be post-Christian. You're not supposed to be Christian. And that is really untrue to the historical narrative of African-American striving in this country.
It's true.
So I think there's a whole argument that could be built. I wish there were a politician running for office somewhere having a good chance of getting elected to represent a largely African-American constituency who could frame his or her platform in those kind of terms. I mean, about getting back to basics, about embracing the best. And I think patriotism, that's flag waving, pro-American, loving your country patriotism would be a part of that, could be a part of that.
Going back to the nation's Judeo-Christian roots, and you look at black prosperity coming out of the period of slavery around the turn of the century, and the dysfunction that's happened in the black community, it clearly accelerated during the 1960s when the whole country sort of went to hell. But the black community, when academia started, this whole thing about you can't criticize behaviors because you are blaming the victim. And when blacks embrace victimology, then it seems to me that we were on our way down. And somehow we have to stop thinking of ourselves as helpless victims, and that will allow ourselves, if we thought we were being oppressed by whites, the way we're going about addressing it, it doesn't make any sense.
But this is why I'm saying I sometimes wonder whether it's too late. I mean, you are an expert, an academic expert on voting rights, on race and voting and representation. And there used to be a situation where black people really could not get to the polls. That's why the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was necessary. But today, the argument is voter suppression. If you ask somebody to show an identification card and mail out ballots to everybody, start the election 6 weeks before it's actually starting, and end the election 6 weeks after it's actually ended, in order to ensure African-American representation. Now, this is something that former President Barack Obama, former Attorney General Eric Holder, and so forth, Stacey Abrams, they're all behind this. I wonder what you would say about this as an expert on voting, Dr. Swain.
And Marxism is behind it. And there are some of us that are woke. You're woke, I'm woke. And I think there are millions of other people that are either woke already or they're awakening some of our young people. I think it's too early for us to throw in the towel. You have done some great work throughout your life. And, even though I'm not that much younger than you, I'm old enough, I don't know how to say this. I was influenced by your work when I was in graduate school, but I was a little bit older than some of the other students. But you've been making an impact. You've been very consistent with your message. And so I look forward to the work that you are going to continue to do. We need to take a break right now. When we return, I want you to talk about your podcast and give a message to the people that are watching the show today.
For those of you who would like to know what exactly our children are facing in their education system, this is a must-read book. It will equip you and prepare you to make decisions about your child's health, about your child's education. So I want to encourage every one of you to grab a copy of Dr. Swain's book and join with me and Carol on the front lines in this critical time to eradicate the liberal abduction of our children.
Cooper Steel is a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee. What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel's motto is, "Build strong, stand strong." Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain.
I'm back with my guest, Glenn Loury. Glenn, you've done a lot of thought about this. You have a podcast. Talk a little bit about your podcast and what you hope to achieve and what you are accomplishing through your guests.
Okay, my podcast is called The Glenn Show. That's two N's, Glenn, The Glenn Show.
So creative.
And you can find it on YouTube. And you can find it at patreon.com/The Glenn Show. Sorry, /Glenn Show. And I interview people every week. New episodes go up on Mondays. And every other week, I talk with John McWhorter, who's an African-American intellectual. He teaches at Columbia University. We're the black guys at bloggingheads.tv, we call ourselves. And we kick it around about what's going on in politics, culture, and racial issues. That's the Glenn Show at bloggingheads.tv.
Okay, Glenn, talking to John McWhorter, and I know John McWhorter's work, and the people that you bring on, do you think that the people that need to hear the conversation, are they hearing the conversation, and do you think the people that need to hear the conversations that you're having, are they hearing the conversation? And then when we look at a lot of what's happening involving Black Americans, at the root, it's white progressives. White progressives, are they listening? Are they responding?
Yeah, they're not. I mean, I get a fair amount of pushback in the comments and whatnot at the Glenn Show to people who would understand themselves as white progressives. But I'm the boogeyman. I'm a conservative in their eyes, and a black conservative, and that's beyond the pale. I do get some encouraging notes and replies and responses from young people, including young people of color, young Black and brown people, who say they hear what I'm saying and they're provoked and they're by it. And even some of my students at Brown come around and let me know that they appreciate the fresh kind of perspective that I'm bringing to a pretty stale, conversation. So it's not all bleak, but like I've been saying all along, I don't know if it's too late.
Well, Glenn, are you the only conservative professor at Brown University? Or how many are in the Ivy League that you would consider conservative? I know you'd be able to count them on one hand, so I would throw out Robert George as one. How many others?
Yeah, there's not so many. I'm not sure everybody that I can think of. My friend Harvey Mansfield at Harvard University is a stalwart. I wouldn't want to get into naming names here, Carol, but not so many. And I'm not even sure I want to fess up to being a conservative. I
know, because sometimes I don't know where you
it's
are
labeled.
faith-wise.
I don't want to be labeled. I want to be just taken on
Glenn,
my own account. That's what I'm saying.
Glenn, sometimes I don't know where you are faith-wise. I don't know if I have to get you saved, but I was very pleased today when you talked about the Judeo-Christian roots of the Black community and how they've lost sight of that. It's almost like government became God for some Black folk.
Okay, you could put that on the cover. That could be a slogan. I think there's some truth to it. In my own case, God's not finished with me yet, Carol.
That's right. So we are works in progress. Going back to the situation with Black America and the direction that we're headed in, it does seem like, for whatever reason, the progressives think that exploiting the grievances, that's the way that you're going to bring people together. And just this whole double speak, you know, when they talk about now the left, they're calling, now the left, they seem to be calling for unity when all they do is divide, you know, diversity and divisiveness. And now they're using the language of unity, but they have not changed their approach. Nothing about the approach has changed.
I agree, they're bullies. Unity, that's complete BS. They just want to have their way. They're pushing you around. And they're dangerous, actually, Carol, in my opinion. They are a threat to our civilization. That puts it very, very sharply, but I actually think it's true.
So
I mean, look at what's happening. They are basically saying, don't enforce the laws because doing so might have a disparate effect on Black people. They're saying, don't have standards of academic excellence because enforcing them would reveal some disparities by race.
Isn't
they
that
are
so racist because they're saying that Black people
completely devoid of any sense of personal responsibility or accountability. Right. I mean, it's not a good situation.
Well, Glenn, I'd like to have you on again sometime, and I know that you are working on projects, but we need another book from you, and it needs to be a book that's read by everyone, progressives as well as the Black community. And I know you're in academia, it's hard for us to write for the general public, but this book needs to be for the general public. And so I am going to have you back on Conversations when your book is published, so that book needs to come out fairly soon. They can turn a book around very quickly, so it needs to be out, you know, sometime in this year or early next year. And until then, I just thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you for the encouragement, Carol Swain. Thank you very much.
Well, we're going to go to break, and when I return, I'll have a few closing comments.
Demands for political correctness and mandatory race and gender diversity training have placed onerous burdens on businesses, churches, and nonprofits. Learn how to improve relations by educating your team with principle-based training that brings people together rather than driving wedges between them. Unity Training Solutions helps your organization build strong teams by respecting and harnessing individual talent, achieving your goals by providing viable alternatives to the divisive and counterproductive critical race and gender theories is our mission. Our expert facilitators and consultants bring greater harmony to workplaces and educational institutions by respecting everyone's civil rights and equality under the law. We encourage Americans to rediscover and re-embrace our national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. A few of our core values and principles include no hidden agendas, respecting the differences of others. Our citizens share more similarities than differences, and trusting in the traditional principles of hard work, integrity, and accountability. Our seminars are geared towards your organization, educational, business, corporate, as well as churches and nonprofits. Want to know more about how to strengthen your team? Knowledge is power. You can learn more about Unity Training Solutions at unitytrainingsolutions.com.
Thanks for joining us today. It's so important for us as Americans to stand together. There's no Black America, white America, Asian America. There's one America. We're going to stand together. We're going to turn this nation around. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you.